Hey.
Okay, guys, I'm here in Toronto with Mr. Steve Hackett, a true prog legend who's here to promote his new album, Wuthering Nights. Steve, thank you so much for receiving us and taking time from your busy schedule to talk to us.
Pleasure.
Wuthering Nights, to what do we owe the legacy of those songs, those Genesis songs, who are still withstanding the test of time?
Well, the Genesis portion of the show is quite large. Of course, there was an album in 1977 called Wind and Wuthering, and because I'm celebrating a tremendous amount of stuff from that album, when we performed in Birmingham, we did several things from that, and I felt that it was appropriate to not only celebrate the stuff, but also to title the album so that people had an idea that that was the main focus of that show. Although there was solo stuff as well, of course. There was all of that, but that's the whole point, that there was both the past and the present being celebrated. As it happens, the album, the last studio album, was a successful album. It was in the charts, and so I was able to celebrate that and the old successes and what have you. And funnily enough, this new CD has gone to the top of the Amazon charts, he said proudly. So so that seems to have taken off. I mean, unlike most live albums, this one seems to be being treated like a studio album. It's done as well, or if not better, than some of my studio albums. So
Yeah.
gives you some idea of the background of it.
Of course. And like you said, there's a selection of songs from your solo career as well. How do you, 20 albums in, 20-something solo albums in, how do you select which ones to play every night?
With great difficulty, but what happens now is that, because there's certain centenaries coming up, like for instance this year is the centenary, the 40th anniversary of Please Don't Touch. I'm celebrating that one as well. So last year it was Wind and Wuthering via Wuthering Nights, and this year it's Please Don't Touch. So we do a couple of things from that. But the songs that I choose are really ones that work best live. The ones that have been road tested. So there's a little bit of everything. There's also a GTR song, When the Heart Rules the Mind, which again was from the band that I had with Steve Howe in the mid-80s, GTR, so I'm playing the song that was best known from that album.
You re-recorded that song.
I re-recorded it. That's right. Yeah. It's a digital single, mainly to advertise the tour, to be honest. So again, acceptance of it has been very good. Response has been very good. But we're on a tight schedule, as you can tell. We just checked into the hotel room, literally late, dragging the bags up and everything. It's all very human.
Yeah.
So,
it's a busy...
it's all on a slender thread. Anyone who's touring will tell you the same thing.
Yeah. And it's a busy year for you too. You soon to hit South America and then Japan. Yeah.
We've got 2 months straight out from home, it's a pretty it's a tough tour even for very young guys doing that. But these guys are professionals. So,
well,
get through it.
Tell us about the band, because you had Nat Suvin there, who does a perfect rendition of those Genesis songs as well.
Yes, yeah. Nat's very good at doing the Genesis stuff in particular, and also the Richie Havens stuff with me. He sings one of those tunes because he has that sort of size of voice, which is quite wonderful. I tend to do the other stuff, the other solo stuff, but as regards his input, he's Swedish American. He recommended our new bass player, which is Jonas Reingold, who's he's a legend amongst bass players. Maybe not as well known to the general public, but that's changing. I think a lot of people said, "Oh, you're working with Jonas. That's great." Jonas, as they say in Sweden, and he's been absolutely brilliant so far. Feels great. He's got a great sense of humour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And on your recent album, The Night Siren, you
Yeah.
had a song where you had Kobe Farhi from Orphan Land
Yes.
singing with you, and
Yes.
now you play a solo in one of the Orphan Land's albums.
That's right. Well, that album, The Night Siren, again, all these night titles, that album had 20 people on it from all over the world. So one from Israel, one from Palestine, Mira Awad from Palestine, and they've worked together before, Orphaned Land. So that's tremendously interesting. And over and above rock and roll, Mira works with a very interesting place, of course, Tel Aviv, and there's Jaffa next door. So you have the Arab town, you have Tel Aviv.
Mm-hmm.
But people come and go freely. There's not always fighting, not everywhere. And there's this very interesting place called the Arab Hebrew Theatre of Jaffa. Very, very interesting.
Mm.
And she sometimes works with that as well. So we like to think, blessed are the peacemakers. Often it is cursed are the peacemakers, because not everybody understands that, you know, you try and heal the differences, and not everybody gets thanked for that. But speaking in terms of that important factor of this last album, the last studio album, which had all these people from everywhere, from Azerbaijan, Iceland, Israel, Palestine, United States, United Kingdom, Hungary, instruments from everywhere. The whole idea was that in the face of politics, which is growing ugly and not really delivering the message of peace and love and integration that the world craves, I like to think that for musicians there don't have to be any borders. So we showed that it's possible to have peaceful cooperation from everyone. So the idea of globalization as a natural extension of friendship is what was important about that album. I don't think nationalism is going to be the answer. So much right-wing politics, but people pay so little attention to history. Hitler rode into power on the back of nationalist politics, and we can't afford to have it again. It's as if the 60s never happened. It's as if Vietnam never happened. It's as if the Second World War didn't happen. You realise that wars, of course, the First World War and the Second World War, it's only basically a 20-year gap between the two. I think, we don't have to have this every time. We should be looking for the best that people are capable of, whether it's music, whether it's sport, whether it's engineering, with food. We just should be looking for the best of each other's cultures, not saying, I'm not going to talk to that guy because he's got the wrong colour skin. I didn't believe I'd be saying this within my lifetime, but I am saying it, and it's an important part of what I do. There is one track we do live called Behind the Smoke, which is about refugees. And last year when I was performing that for the first time live, I was saying, you might think refugees is a current problem, but actually it's always been a problem. And my family were refugees 100 years ago, and they were allowed into England. The idea of all of that, perhaps they wouldn't be allowed in today, and so I wouldn't be here. I'd maybe be somewhere else speaking whatever language, speaking in tongues somewhere else. But,
I actually,
over and above music, I think harmony, peace, cooperation, all of that, it's important.
Yeah, I actually spoke with Kobe in December, because I was interviewing him for the new Orphan Land album.
Marvelous.
And I told him, I'm actually trying to interview Steve when he comes around in Toronto and everything. But looking back at when you started in the 60s, 70s, and now what prog has become, Orphan Land is actually considered prog, and it's completely different from what you established with Genesis, and Jethro Tull and those bands.
Yeah.
Do you listen to the modern bands at all, and do you like what it's become?
I listen to everything. I listen to ancient, modern, the whole thing. I listen to everything from classical music to jazz to blues to pop,
Okay.
progressive, current bands, old bands. There are many bands that are very successful today who are doing it with what we now call progressive music. There are so many styles, and so many people are not reliant on media cooperation, because people have their own social media.
Yeah.
So, throughout the world, people are doing very good business and shows to their own audiences. There are not the monopolies. I know that you switch on your TV and you think there was nothing but X Factor being auditioned on TV,
Yeah.
and everyone having to sing dance songs and all that. But actually, I think that for any performer, whatever age you are, you should really be doing what's in your heart, because you're going to be best at that. And you shouldn't be cynical about the power of the spirit, and not to get too bogged down by the idea of popular form as we know it.
Yeah. And do you feel, we just touched upon the record companies and how the industry has changed.
Yes.
Do you still feel pressure from the record companies to, on a creative side, or how do you shape this album, or how do you play this or that song?
No, I think that in the main, my record company just let me get on with it. But we're friends. It's not like there's some huge divide.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we've had this cooperative thing for a very long time. So I'm involved with various aspects. It's a pyramid system. Sony, I'm involved with Inside Out, I'm involved with Century Media, I'm involved with Universal, I'm also involved with Cherry Red. I'm involved in some way with all these companies, you see.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there are retrospectives and box sets coming out the whole time. But most of the time, the record companies realise that I've been around for a long time now doing it, and so we build to a conclusion. It's not a case of anyone trying to change me drastically. I think that I've probably got the most commercial instincts, which are to be not commercial, but then at the same time, we talked about GTR, and GTR was commercially very successful. So I celebrate the hit single that we had with that. I don't spend my life seeking hit singles. I think it would be very wrong. I know a lot of people who've been in the industry for as long as I have, seek hit singles all the time and wonder why they can't get them. And I've always been wary of the fact that you can produce an album which is full of potential hit singles, but then you rob the album of the beauty of, or the possibility of, a journey,
Mm-hmm.
a musical continuum, an odyssey, places for people to visit in the mind, different worlds, a passport to other places. It's very limiting if you put together something that's a collection of potential 3 or 4 minute singles.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to invest in that, I think it's a very heavily oversubscribed club.
Yeah.
And the important thing is, well, what do you do that's different? If you're a writer, you're a singer, you're a performer, a dancer, anyone who's involved in creativity, and I think in other fields as well, in energy. If we all just did what the last guy did, we'd all be burning coal forever and relying on the mines. And of course, we have to think in terms of alternatives, constructive alternatives, in order to move forward and protect the planet. And try and be as respectful as we can, as I say, in the face of politics, which tends to steamroll and look for the instant yield.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very dangerous.
Makes sense. Makes sense. One question that I saw in every other interview was I
Yeah.
was studying for this one is,
Yeah.
are you guys on Genesis going to get back together? I'm not going to ask you that. I'm just going to ask you, why is it that people are so hung up in the past and not in what your current output is and looking forward?
Well, it seems some people are, but other people are interested in the other thing. People are divided. Some people want the Genesis thing, some people want the modern thing. So I feel I can keep the museum doors open for the glorious exhibits that were and do authentic versions.
Mm-hmm.
Not slavishly, but authentically enough. That you know, it's a kind of enlargement. Sometimes I re-record those things. Sometimes it's with an orchestra to take it to the next stage, because I always felt that Genesis should become an orchestra. I will be doing some shows in the UK later this year, which is basically sold out, and so we're adding dates to that. A lot of interest in Genesis with orchestra, Genesis material. So I think it's like classical music by now. I'm trying to keep the legacy of that going, and if it doesn't sound too pompous, it's just a case of making sure that old music, stuff that was recorded 40 years ago and more, that isn't the only thing that you're doing. I think it's important to be vital and keep coming up with new stuff. So I make albums. They chart in a number of territories. You know, if I get albums into the top 20 in several territories, then I think I'm doing well. Sometimes it goes higher, sometimes it goes into, you know, sometimes I find I'm rubbing shoulders with all sorts of people. Two or three albums ago, there I was next to Madonna. You know, I was on the way up, Madonna was on the way up with something. It sticks around for 5 seconds and it's out, and then we're both out. You know, but nothing sticks around really. It seems that, you know, the era of Dark Side of the Moon and you know, Mike Oldfield's Tubular Bells, albums that stuck around for a year or more, or all of the Beatles product, which, you know, continues, goes on for a long time. I think that the legacy was established within the lifetime or the time frame of the one particular product. That, I think, is harder to achieve. But you know, having sold 140 plus million albums with Genesis or whatever it is, you know, during my time, maybe that's half of that. You know, and we just. I think that's great, but you know, I didn't want to be stuck doing or just being in one band forever. It was important to work with other people, which is, you know, how I see it. My allegiance is to music rather than any one particular band, but it's hard to ignore the popularity of Genesis because it's hugely successful. And now we've started releasing Genesis albums with the guys that includes solo stuff as well, because it's important, you know, what each of the individuals have done since then, you know, whether it's Gabriel or Mike Rutherford or Phil Collins or myself or Tony, you know. There is a thread with all of this. But as regards reformations, I think that's hard to achieve. I think it's unlikely that there would be a reformation that involved the 5 people that you're perhaps thinking of. With what comes to be referred to as the classic lineup, although I think that for me the classic lineup also includes my predecessor Anthony Phillips, who I think was a great writer and player with Genesis, and he and I are friends anyway, so I think that's very beautiful. Some very beautiful music came out of that era just before I joined, and I want to show respect to that. I don't like to think I'm a competitive player. I think that Genesis is interesting in all its incarnations, in different ways. Obviously I'm more drawn to the era of the time when I was involved with that. And when I do that and try and reinvent it, as I say, I try and do enlargements so that there's a development to take that to the next stage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's the nearest thing. I think what I was trying to get around to in my long-winded way was that as Nad, our singer who does the Genesis stuff, was saying to me today, you know, when you hear work that was written by classical people, you don't expect to hear the original. You expect that it's orchestras like the London Philharmonic or the London Chamber Orchestra or the London Symphony Orchestra taking these songs, and you never really know what the take was that Tchaikovsky had, Bach, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But the music goes on, and to protect that, I think, is important. When I was working with Richie Havens and I was playing him back Please Don't Touch, I think he was pleased with what we'd done with it, with his voice, and he said, I think this is the classical music of the future. So very proud to have him say that. I was quite dismissive of that at the time, you know, because when you're young, you've got your mindset on other things. But you know, I play some of that live, and I'm very happy to have worked with such gifted, extraordinary people over time. Not just the Genesis people, but many of the others.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for your time. I know you have a busy schedule.
Yeah,
but,
I've got to dive right out, go off
yeah.
to sound check right now.
Have a great show, man.
But thank you.
Thank you so much.
Lovely talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.